The last month, every open-weight AI story has come from one place: China. GLM, Kimi, Qwen, DeepSeek, one after another, free models that undercut the American giants on price and close the gap on quality. If you only watch the headlines, you'd think the West had simply stopped competing on open models. Yesterday, that stopped being true. A San Francisco lab called Poolside released Laguna S 2.1, Laguna S 2.1, a 118 billion parameter open-weight coding model that, on the benchmarks the company published, matches or beats models several times its size. It runs on a single desktop. The weights are free on Hugging Face right now, under a genuinely permissive license, and it was trained start to finish in under 4 weeks. In the next few minutes, what this model actually is, the architecture trick that lets a mid-size model punch far above its weight, the honest read on those benchmark numbers, including who published them and what that means, how the model factory behind it might matter more than the model itself, and where this fits in the open weight war that just went global. As always, what's confirmed, what's the company's own claim, cleanly separated. Let's get into it. Start with the headline, because the headline is a paradox. This is a big model that behaves like a small one, and a small model that performs like a big one. Both are true, and the reason is a mixture of experts' design, the same architecture we've covered on this channel with GLM and Kimi. Here's the plain English version. Laguna S 2.1 has 118 billion total parameters. But for any single token it generates, it only activates about 8 billion of them, roughly 6.8%. All 118 billion sit resident in memory, but only a tiny slice routes through the network on each step. The full library is on the shelves. The model only pulls the handful of books it needs for the current sentence. That sparsity is the whole magic trick. It gives you the knowledge capacity of a large model with the running cost of a small one. It's why a 118 billion parameter model can go toe-to-toe with systems 10 times its size and still be cheap enough to serve. And cheap enough to serve is not a figure of speech here. Poolside worked with NVIDIA to squeeze this thing down until it fits on a single NVIDIA DGX Spark, a desktop system. At 4-bit precision, one Spark runs it. It's shipped with day one support for the tools our audience actually uses: vLLM, Asterisk, Ollama, and llama.cpp. Let that land, a model competitive with the frontier on coding that a serious developer can run on one machine under their own roof, from day one, in Ollama. That is the exact thesis this channel has been tracking all month, now wearing a Western jersey. The other headline spec, a 1 million token context window in both thinking and no-thinking modes. Enough to hold an entire large codebase in working memory, which for an agentic coding model whose entire job is planning and editing across many files, is the difference between a toy and a tool. So how good is it really? Here are the numbers, and here's the honest asterisk on them. On Terminal Bench 2.1, a benchmark of long horizon terminal tasks, the kind of multi-step agentic work that actually matters for coding agents, Laguna S 2.1 scores 70.2%. On Qwen Pro, just under 60. On Qwen Multilingual, 78.5. Poolside says this matches or beats open models several times its size, naming DeepSeek V4, NVIDIA's Nematron 3 Ultra, and Thinking Machines Inkling. VentureBeat placed that terminal bench score at 11th on Poolside's compiled leaderboard, ahead of DeepSeek V4 Pro Max. For a 118 billion parameter model, beating models with more than a trillion on long horizon coding is a genuinely striking result. Now the asterisk, because this is where this channel earns its keep. Most of these headline numbers are benchmarks Poolside published about its own model. Some are cross-checked by third parties. The model card notes that certain scores come via artificial analysis and scale AI's leaderboards, which is good practice, but the framing, the comparison set, and the leaderboard are the company's own. That doesn't make them wrong. Poolside has a real reputation and publishes full evaluation trajectories you can inspect, which is more transparency than most. But launch day vendor benchmarks are a starting line, not a finish line. The real test is independent evaluation and, more importantly, how it feels in your own editor on your own code over a week. The company itself says, plainly the model is not yet at the frontier. Respect that honesty and treat the numbers as a strong, verifiable in principle claim, not gospel. There's also a real cost hidden in those scores, and Poolside discloses it, which I appreciate. The big numbers come from the model's default max thinking mode. On DeepSeek, turning that reasoning up takes it from about 16% to 40%. A huge jump, but one that burns a lot of tokens to get there. So the honest read is, it's very capable when you let it think hard, and thinking hard costs tokens. Same trade-off we've seen across every reasoning model this year. Know which mode you're paying for. Now the part that might matter more than the model, how it was built. Poolside says Laguna S 2.1 went from the start of training to launch in under 4 weeks, on 4,000 NVIDIA H200 GPUs. Its smaller sibling launched 3 weeks earlier. The company claims a new model cadence of roughly 5 weeks. That velocity comes from something they call the Model Factory, an internal platform that automates the slow, error-prone parts of model development. architecture search, and reinforcement learning from actually running code. And here's the detail I find genuinely remarkable. This model used the exact same pre-training data as its smaller predecessor. Nearly all the improvement came from scale, training fixes, and post-training across a corpus of 409,000 agentic training environments, not from new data. Think about what that implies. If a lab can reliably turn the same data into a materially better model every 5 weeks by automating the experimentation, then the moat isn't the model sitting in front of you, it's the factory behind it. Any single model is a snapshot. The factory is the thing that keeps shipping. That's a different way to compete with giants. Not outspending them on scale, but out-iterating them on process. Whether it holds up over many releases is the open question, but as a strategy, it's the most interesting thing in this announcement. And there's a piece of Poolside's backstory that recontextualizes all of this. This is not a random startup chasing a trend. Poolside has spent most of its 3-year existence quietly selling coding models to governments and defense agencies. The kind of customer that cannot, under any circumstances, send its source code to someone else's cloud. That heritage explains the entire shape of this release. A model built to run on hardware you physically control, shipped open so a security-conscious organization can audit and self-host it, to show off what it can actually do. Poolside published a full trajectory of the model independently, solving a hard combinatorics problem that, until recently, only the largest frontier models could crack. One of those long-horizon reasoning tasks where a model has to plan, attempt, backtrack, and verify over many steps. The company's whole bet is that serious buyers will pay to run a capable model on their own infrastructure rather than rent intelligence through an API. And this release is that bet made in public. Quick, honest limits, because runs on a desktop needs fine print. That single Spark story is at 4-bit quantization. The full precision weights are around 236 gigabytes and need multiple GPUs. A DGX Spark is a real desktop, but it's a developer workstation, not a laptop. This isn't Calibri-style runs on your 5-year-old machine territory. At least not yet, though the same SSD streaming and quantization tricks we've covered will chase it there. And the license OpenMDW 1.1 from the Linux Foundation is permissive and allows commercial use. But it's a newer model-specific license, so if you're deploying commercially, read it rather than assuming it's identical to MIT. So who is this for today? If you have access to a capable workstation and you want a frontier-adjacent coding agent that never sends your proprietary code to anyone's cloud, this is one of the most compelling open options that has ever existed, and it's free to download. If you just want to try it, hosted access runs through OpenRouter, free at 256,000 context. And if you're an enterprise whose whole reason for waiting was, we can't send our codebase to a closed API, Poolside built this model and its entire business precisely for you. Step back, and here's why yesterday actually mattered. The open-weight frontier has for months been an almost entirely Chinese story, to the point where CNBC reported that Chinese platforms now handle 45% of US companies' token consumption, up from 11% at the start of the year. Laguna S 2.1 is the clearest sign yet that Western labs are answering, not by locking everything behind an API, but by playing the same open game: free weights, permissive license, runs on your hardware, benchmarks in the open. And the timing is almost theatrical. DeepSeek v4 goes stable in 2 days. Kimi K3's weights drop free in 5. This week is shaping up to be the single biggest concentration of open weight releases the industry has ever seen. And for the first time in a while, the West just fired the opening shot. The moat was the model, then the price, then the release cadence, and now the whole board is playing open. That's not a threat to developers. That's the best position we've ever been in. So here's my question, and I'll pin it below. For your actual work, does it matter where an open model comes from? Would you run a Western open model over a Chinese one? Or the reverse, and why? Performance, license, trust, principle. Tell me what actually decides it for you. The answer, across everyone watching, is the real story of this open weight week. Every source, Poolside's release, the Hugging Face model card, the benchmark leaderboards, and the reporting I cited is linked in the description so you can verify every number yourself. That's the standard on this channel. And with DeepSeek v4 and Kimi K3's weights both landing this week, the follow-ups are already planned. Subscribe and you'll catch everyone. I'll see you in the next one.